I wonder if we need to reject the word normal and look for something better. I don't want to be that normal. I hope I never have to experience the trauma of going through being a refugee and being a normal refugee. And I really don't want to lead my life being a normal person who is indifferent, like of people who undergo incredible hardship to seek a better life. Hello and welcome to another episode of Idioms of Normality on Future Framed TV, the podcast series of Traces.Dreams. I'm your host, Paul Mason, and today I have with me a fantastic guest, Marjorie Tenchavez. Marjorie, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Paul. Hello, everyone. Happy to be here.
Well, I'm happy that you're happy to be here because I'm really looking forward to this conversation. But before we jump in, tell me a bit about yourself.
My name is Marjorie, and I am what you would call an activist. I know that word is quite divisive these days, but I would probably call myself an activist. So I'm from a Filipino-Australian background. I came here with my mum and my younger brother when I was about 10. So I'm 10 or 11 and was raised by a single parent. Then I realized as I got older, no, she did a good job. Then I think I also raised myself. I think moving to a new country at that age anyway, like really had to grow up very, very quickly. And I suppose I've always been quite an independent person. Like my mom just let me roam free. We used to go to the city at 11 and 12 years of age. And then I think when I tell people that, like, oh my God, I wasn't allowed until I was 15. Like, no, I would go to the city and just hang out at Darling Harbour. But so, yeah, like my upbringing and my curiosity about the world has led me to working in the social justice sector. So I met Paul at university. He was one of my tutors. And I did a social science degree. And I actually at university, when I was doing my undergrad, that's how I was introduced to what I'm doing now anyway, which is working with refugees and migrants and people seeking asylum. One of the friends that I made at uni, she was also a mature student. So I would just gravitated towards the mature students in class. So she founded this this group called Villawood Volleys. So she used to organize trips to Villawood Detention Center and do like little activities there for the refugees and people seeking asylum in Villawood. So I met her, then I joined, and then we used to go on weekends and because like they were all very bored. Like they were just happy saying, we didn't go in there going, hey guys, like we're here to save you. They were just happy to see other people outside. And we made some friends and I learned heaps of new skills too. Like I think I learned how to like create a worm farm. It was just an activity that we did and yeah, it was just really hanging out. Sometimes we'd bring board games. At the time, some of them were allowed to like the Circle was running Villawood Detention Center at the time, and this was before they renovated it. So I'd say the rules were more relaxed at the time. Now, when you visit, I haven't been in a while, but the last time I went, this was after renovation. They now have like 3 security walls, and whereas before it was just like one wall, and we were able to hang out with them in the common room. So yeah, like have little picnics and stuff like that. But that was like my first foray into that in the refugee asylum seeker sector. And, I guess coming from a migrant background, I was able to empathize with what they were going through. I don't come from an activist family. My mum, first few years, she didn't really quite understand why I kept talking about refugees. And, I used to post a lot about it on Facebook. And then my family in the Philippines would see it too, like, why was she always posting about these things? And then they'd ask my mom, she's like, oh, no. And then, so it took a little while to understand like but yeah, that was really good. I'm glad that I, started doing that at Villa Volleys. It got a bit, I think I quit after about 1 year. It was just too much, and not too much for me, but it was too much dealing with the bureaucracy. Circa just made it harder for visitors to come in. And I guess life took me to other places, so I finished my undergrad and then I got a job at just like a community center, then I went for a job at Amnesty International Australia. So I worked as a refugee caseworker there whilst I was working at this community center. So it was part-time. So that was definitely wasn't the hardest job I've ever done. I feel like they didn't really give us much training. They did, but it was like throwing us in there, and we were dealing with the clients that we had were people that were still in detention in Australia and in Nauru. And I was like one of the older caseworkers there, but the rest of the team, they were still at uni. Yeah, or just straight out of uni. And I feel that was a lot to put us in these roles and talking to people who had been waiting for a while, were just not getting the right care, like the amount of care that they should be getting. Like even things like I remember people would wait 3 months to get a dentist appointment, and the policy was they're supposed to get the same level of care that would be getting outside of the detention centers. But yeah, that was not the case. And we're dealing with a lot of people that like the medical transfers as well. Yeah, it was tough. And there were times when we'd be talking to one client and then we find out the next week that they've been transferred to another detention center. So we'd lose track. But that definitely has that, if anything, like that's made me more resilient now. It was a good training, but yeah, it was really tough. So from Amnesty International to I don't know, I think I had a little bit of a break. I went into community development, and then now I'm still work with refugees, back to working with refugees and people seeking asylum, but I also have my own social enterprise, which is Welcome Merchant.
Yeah. So Welcome Merchant is really fascinating. And how can people learn more about it? And what is it?
Welcome Merchant is a social enterprise that I founded last year. So it started off just as an Instagram account. I launched it on Instagram at the beginning of lockdown in Sydney. I just thought, yeah, why not? It's like I have more free time now on weekends, so yeah, it was great. I was inspired to start it by accounts like Black Business and um, by Indigenous and spend with them. So I saw how well these platforms were doing for businesses that were affected by the bushfires and Indigenous owned businesses. And so I thought, well, we should do one for refugee and asylum seeker entrepreneurs. Just, like, why not? Like I knew so many of them because I've been working in the sector for quite some time. So I thought, okay, I'll just start this Instagram account. It'll just be my little side project. Of course, it has grown to more than that. So
you're running all sorts of activities, now, aren't you? All over.
Yeah. So it's we're still promoting the entrepreneurs for free. So on our social media channels, and we now have an online directory as well. But the social enterprise side of things are just the events that we're doing. So we're calling them curated dining experiences. So these are the cooking classes and pop-up dinners.
I love seeing these posts pop up, and I love seeing what you're doing, which is why I wanted to ask your perspectives on normality, and I wanted to know, what does an activist / refugee advocate, how do they see the world, and how do they see what is normal from that perspective? Because you have such an interesting look at it, and I'm interested in wherever this goes. From your perspective, what is normal?
What is normal? I mean, who dictates what's normal anyway? I think I've just seen, coming from a refugee activist perspective, I've seen too many injustices anyway. Like, unfortunately, that's become normalized now, and people being indifferent is also to these injustices is normal.
Wow. So indifference has become normalized. Injustice has become normalized. People go around seeking the comforts and conveniences of their normality and turning a blind eye.
Yeah. And I know that sounds really super cynical, but it's what I'm seeing anyway, and what I have seen. It's people just go on, and it's this working in this sector is pretty tiring. Like, I'm not going to lie. There was a period when 2 years ago I was ready to like change sectors. I wanted to go into sustainability, or something else, and or even a criminal. I thought about becoming a criminologist anyway, which is super random, but yeah, because you don't see many wins, and then in this sector, and we've had this ongoing refugee issue for so long now. So in Australia, it doesn't get talked about anymore. So it's become normal to like
And
Yes, we
and
have
welcome
refugees in
merchant,
detention.
welcome
Mm.
merchant. I don't want to use the word fights back, but pushes back against what we've normalized in society, because you're normalizing people going to a refugee to have a really lovely dinner out. You're encouraging cultural diversity, but you're encouraging people to embrace it through activities that involve refugees being seen as business people, being seen for more than more than just a refugee status, being seen for someone who has something to contribute, someone who has artistic skills, someone who has culinary skills. It normalizes a different discourse.
Yes, that was always like the aim, is to show people that yes, they are just normal human beings. They have the same hopes and dreams as you. They can start a business. They can fail without any support as well. But they are just normal. I absolutely spot on there.
So I'm going to put
To
my
have a meal with them.
so I'm going to yeah, to have a meal with them, to put people in contact. Yeah,
Mhm.
to be face to face and to share
To
the
be
story,
face to face, to talk to
because
them.
you've heard all these stories. But how many people outside those spheres have heard those stories and put a face to someone who has had the refugee experience? How many people
Mm.
can do that? But I'm going to pull you up on something, and
Mm-hmm.
because I think we could have an interesting. It might seem like a theoretical discussion, but I think it's a discussion we have to really pound this matter into the earth. You
Sure.
said you said people need to recognize that they are. Well, I'm paraphrasing here, but you used the word. They're just normal human beings. They are normal.
Mm-hmm.
And you use
Yeah.
the word normal there. And I wonder if we have to reject the word normal. Because if 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 you're saying that refugees are just normal people, then you're also kind of saying, and I'm purposefully creating a sort of a break in the code here for what
Yeah.
you're saying.
Yeah.
But you also said that what is normal for other people is to turn a blind eye, to seek the comforts and conveniences of everyday life without caring about what's happening to people who are seeking asylum or seeking refuge. And so I wonder if we need to reject the word normal and look for something better, because
Yeah.
I I don't want to be I don't want to be that normal. I mean, I don't want to be. I don't hope I never have to experience the trauma of going through being a refugee and being a normal refugee. And I really don't want to lead my life being a normal person who is indifferent to the
Mm.
plight of people who undergo incredible hardship to seek
Mm.
a better life.
Yeah.
And I just feel that we can rip the guts out of normality in both of those scenarios so that we can see each other better. So we can stop that having that filter uh, of our own personal and cultural biases uh, influencing how we see each other, and so that we can do things like meet at a table and have someone from a completely different culture and a different life experience and life history prepare a meal.
Mm. Yeah. And generate those conversations between them. I mean, guess that's what we're trying to do, is like bridging this so-called gap anyway. Um, it's we've had some with these dinners. I mean, we haven't had done so many of them, but we've certainly been given some feedback by some previous attendees, and people are interested. Like they're interested. They want to hear more from the entrepreneurs, and that's why they come along for the experience, I suppose. And for me, I'm like, oh, I suppose that being in this sector, and I've lived in a little bubble too, so this assumption that most people have met or have met people from diverse backgrounds, but that's not really the case, and there's still quite a gap that we have to bridge there.
It's interesting because on the surface you can walk around Australia and you can go, oh wow, there's such rich diversity of people. There's lots of people from Southeast Asia. There's people from Europe. There's people from North and
Mm,
South Asia. Uh, and you look on the surface, it looks like there's a lot of cultural diversity, but the border control policies of Australia actually filter out a certain kind of migrant, and it filters
mm-hmm,
out, and even the people who come here to Australia as students and then later on seek permanent residency and have to do a lot of sometimes 10, 12 years of study while working and then getting a job that fits the PR criteria.
That's
The,
right.
the filter that not we, because I really don't want to be included in this image of Australia, but unfortunately, I through the visa and the passport, sorry, through the passport that I hold, I'm part of it.
Mm,
But the people who we filter out people from a certain socioeconomic status,
mm,
and so yes, on the surface, we have that cultural diversity, but we're also filtering out people who could afford to become Australians. Uh,
mm.
People who can afford to become Australians are the ones who become Australians.
That's right. Or people who who could not necessarily afford, but who would have people that they can borrow money from,
Mm.
so they could come to Australia. I just remember the story of a former refugee. He was one of the when they added an additional 10,000 spots to the current refugee intake. So a few years ago we were at 21,000. Now it's like 13, but 13,000 spots, and that also includes people that are already here. So I've met people who come on different visas, like postgraduate visas, and then apply for asylum. So anyway, it's not many spots, but this gentleman came in through as part of that increased intake from Syria, and he was a dentist, but he was like an older gentleman in his 60s, but his English wasn't very strong. For him to requalify as a dentist, he would have been really costly and really time consuming. So he, I think he did a dental assistant role. No one wanted to hire him. Like, of course, no one wanted to hire him because I think, oh, and this came from a lady that works for a dentist association. She said that their dentists would just look at his qualifications and go, no, like he's too overqualified. Maybe put me out of work. So he couldn't find a dental assistant role, and he became so um, what's the word? But yeah, not defeated, but to the point that he wanted to go back to Syria. Yeah, he's like, what? No one's going to value me here. And now he works as a truck driver.
It reminds me somehow of how my personal thinking about poverty has evolved. On the surface, we've always thought, I use that word a lot. No, on the surface, because we're really peeling back beneath
Yeah.
the beautiful veneer, but the dirty underground of
And
Australian
this,
political
mm-hmm,
life. Yeah,
mm,
but poverty is a related issue, obviously,
mm,
and it took me a long time to realize that poverty isn't just simply not having money. Not having money is part of
yeah,
living in poverty, but poverty is a lack of social connections and a lack of social incorporation. And one of the real difficulties here for someone coming into Australian life, particularly sometimes after 4 or 5, if not more years in these horribly labelled detention centres,
mm-hmm,
but very aptly labelled because of what goes on in them.
yeah,
They come to Australia and they lack the social connections because they've been denied the social connections that allow them to become socially incorporated in ways that, uh, like the Syrian dentist. If he
mm-hmm,
was in a Syrian community where there was a dentist who would have liked someone with dental skills and translation skills, brilliant.
mm,
You know,
mm,
like that.
yeah,
Why are we denying people those opportunities? It's to simply be socially incorporated in a way that allows them to have enough food to put on their table at the end of the night. And
yeah,
I don't want to be too simplistic about that story because
yeah. There's a lot to
there's a lot of
this.
dimensions to it, and I don't want to.
Yeah,
It's hard to. We problematize this situation, right? We need to think about it in new ways. What questions do you think we could ask about what has become normal within the Australian system, but within your work with refugees, the things that have
mm,
become normal and the things that you're challenging? What questions can we ask about that?
sure. Like, if we can, it can be as simple as like, what is a refugee? What do people think of what a refugee is? What is an asylum seeker? Who are these people? Like this this one thing that I've been pushing back on a lot lately, and which is this whole image of a good migrant. Uh, it's like why do we only celebrate them when they've done something good, right? So, or especially when like this whole we're meant to be grateful for being here, especially with refugees and people seeking asylum. Yes, we've given them protection, and from them too, they always feel that they have to say we're really thankful that Australia's given us this life, but it hasn't all. It's not what it's all cracked up to be. And if they do dare to speak out, then they get vilified. So these are a lot of issues that I've been thinking about lately, and with welcome merchant, I'm conscious of the fact that I'm putting them out there as like, hey, they're business owners. I'm not saying they're successful business owners, and not all of them are, but they are also business owners. They can run and start a business, and I guess showing that they're contributing to society. But then a part of me is also like wanting to push back on that and say, what if? Well, it's okay if they're not necessarily contributing to society in an economical sense. Am I making sense here? But
Absolutely.
yeah.
I really like that, to really push back against, to ask questions about why we have this myth of the good migrant.
Yeah. And it's talked about a lot in America now. I mean, this whole model minority, but it doesn't get talked about in Australia so much. With the business owners that I've featured that we work with, they all have other jobs or qualifications, but they started a business just because no one would give them a job.
Yeah.
So that's the case for many of them. So just like, well, I might as well be my own boss. And it's glamorized, like they're all like, oh, yeah, it's great. Like migrants are very entrepreneurial, especially refugees. Well, they've been forced to start their own business because no one will give them a chance.
Marjorie, I still remember you going to the Villawood Volleys a decade ago, and
yeah,
and the work you were doing, and I was so impressed, and I thought you were just such an amazing person, and I'm so grateful that I was able to reconnect and that you could join this series and talk about your work with Welcome Merchant, which is awesome, and I wish you every success with it. And also for sharing with us the very difficult conversation about how we question what has become normal, how we can normalize other discourses and perhaps reject normality altogether. So thank you so much for your time. And thank you to our listeners for joining Idioms of Normality on Future Framed TV, the podcast series of Traces.Dreams. I've been your host, Dr. Paul Mason, and I've been joined today by Marjorie Tenchavez.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks, everyone.